it does make me, we're live, think better.
Okay, we're live. January 30th, Senate Education Committee. And today we're going to take up a couple other things. We're going to take up S214, an act relating to the provision of kindergarten education in geographically isolated school districts. Something that we actually heard a little bit out from inadvertently, almost from a couple of our witnesses. Especially from the Northeast Kingdom. This bill is, I think, designed to get at some of the issues they raised. So, and this bill was introduced by Senator Ron Hinsdale, and she is here to give us the introduction, followed by Beth James with the walkthrough. And we'll have fresh copies, by the way.
Great. For the record, Senator Ron Hinsdale, a member of this committee, and it was actually, I believe, last year in this committee on Northeast Kingdom Day that we heard together from Essex County residents who highlighted for us that they end up having quite sparse representation. It's a sparsely populated county. They have their one senator and they have one member of the House. And, you know, sometimes that means we don't always hear in all the committees of jurisdiction about the experiences of some of those far-flung counties. I would chalk this up to essentially taxation without representation. This is a part of the state that pays into the payroll tax and should be eligible for the childcare subsidies that we have already passed. It's already law. But their geographic isolation makes it very hard for them to access an actual childcare center. We recognize this more often in the Upper Valley and other parts of the state where the identity across the Connecticut River is sort of more pronounced and more known. But it became, I think, very obvious to us when we visited Essex County that they treat a lot of the population centers just across the river in New Hampshire as their centers of commerce, as the places that they would access resources like childcare centers. So this has been very carefully worded. And it's, you know, it's taken actually over a year to get the language right. And you may hear more from others about that. So, and I think we have had conversations about what geographic isolation really means. This may have broader context for those conversations, but truly, just as with K through 12, pre-K have some elements of geographic isolation. And we're trying to address that for Essex County. You know, it's not often that folks from that county can even come down to meet with us. So I'm really grateful that we heard about this last Northeast Kingdom Day. We have folks coming once again from Essex County to really advocate for families who then can stay in Essex County because they have access to childcare. And that really is the intent of the bill. And I think it's easy for other witnesses to walk through the language and why it's worded that way. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
So, this we're ready for St. James. Don't want the
I'm sorry?
Don't want the
One the only. That's St. James, Office of Legislative Counsel. Would you like me to share my screen for the walkthrough, or do you all have it?
We all have it. I think it's posted, right? I think so. It's posted.
Okay. So this bill is, so we're going to walk through S114. I'm sorry, S214 as introduced, an act relating to the provision of pre-kindergarten education in geographically isolated school districts. So this bill is specific to pre-K. And so section 1 of the bill amends our pre-K education statute, which is section 829 of Title 16, which lives actually in the courses of study. I'm sorry, not courses of study, maintenance of public schools chapter, which is also where the tuition statutes live. But we have one statute governing pre-K education, and that's section 829. And so what section 1 proposes to do is require the the First Amendment, which is actually on page 2, is there's a rule series for pre-kindergarten education, and it's jointly developed by AOE and DCF. And the state board actually owns those rules. And page 2, line 1, subdivision 12 is proposing to add to the rules a definition for geographically isolated school district, as the term relates to the provision of pre-kindergarten education under subsection I of this section, which we'll walk through next. And it requires the agency and the department to establish a process for a pre-K student residing in a geographically isolated school district to enroll in a pre-K program located in New Hampshire. So first amendment to the pre-K statute is require the rules to come up with a definition for what geographically isolated school district means.
Question.
This actually might be a question for you, Senator.
Mm.
Why just New Hampshire? Why not Mass and New York?
And this could be a question for Beth or some of our other witnesses, but we wanted to make sure it was limited to going outside of the state in counties where there simply was no option in that county. There's really unique features of Essex County as opposed to places that border Massachusetts and New York, where we have not heard this concern come up that there's simply no eligible childcare centers. And New Hampshire has specific regulations that this needed to work with. So I'd certainly welcome conversation about Massachusetts and New York. Certainly in the year we've been working on this language, it's just come up that the regulations need to work better with New Hampshire and that Essex County is uniquely facing this experience. And more people can say.
That's good. We need to consider Canada as well, just to make sure we're covering the bases.
That would be like a whole other set of regulations for childcare, and I don't know who would.
We're talking about pre-K.
Yeah, it's highly regulated. Yeah, I mean, right now it's taking tax dollars out of the state, so I don't know if it could go out of the country. I don't know. I guess it can with K through 12. Not really.
Well, all I'm saying is
Yeah.
when we dig deeper into this, I
Mhm.
agree, Massachusetts, New York, just get Canada, if it's applicable, it's applicable. It's not.
What I don't want to do with this bill is sort of open it up to criticism in other realms that is about like other things. This is just
either
how
about
Essex
the kids or
County-
it's not about the kids. I would submit that they're doing the right thing in New Hampshire. It's a good start, but I think at least we need to see if there's a problem to solve. If not, we don't go there.
And I should back up and say that section 829, which we are in right now, governs pre-kindergarten education as it relates to the universal pre-kindergarten education program. So the 10 hours of pre-K that is allotted to each student in the state. Subsection H, I'm on page 2, line 8. Subsection H is right now called geographic limitations. We're gonna retitle that pre-kindergarten regions and then not touch any of the rest of subsection H. This is a current law that allows school districts to kind of set a region within which those pre-K dollars can go. But because we're going to talk about geographically isolated districts, that term geographic, we didn't want to get anyone confused, so we're just retitling this subsection. So then the real big substantive piece of this bill is, if you scroll all the way down to the very bottom of page 3, line 18, adding a new subsection to the statute entitled Geographically Isolated School Districts. So notwithstanding any provision of law to the contrary, on behalf of a resident pre-K child, a school district shall pay tuition for pre-kindergarten education for 10 hours per week for 35 weeks to a pre-kindergarten program located outside Vermont if the following conditions are met. And we're going to walk through those conditions, but I just want to highlight that 10 hours per week for 35 weeks is the entitlement for all children in the state. So if the following conditions are met, that 10 hours for 35 weeks can be provided to a program outside the state. If the pre-K student is a resident of a geographically isolated school district as defined by the State Board of Education, and that's what we walked through first, requiring the rules to define that term. And the pre-K program located outside Vermont is approved to provide publicly funded pre-K education under the laws of New Hampshire and is located within 25 miles of the Vermont border.
Just a question on Act 73, did we also use the 25-mile limit? Is that
No.
the same? No. What was that limit? Just out of curiosity.
There is no limit.
You are thinking about something that was in the bill. and
Mhm.
fell out.
Right. Okay.
Correct. Yep.
Ours too. Yeah. That was, you're thinking that for a reason.
There's gonna be a quiz on Act 73. any day now.
I mean, it's a good quiz to have.
Okay, so payments made pursuant to the subsection shall be paid under the same statewide rate that is paid to pre-qualified pre-kindergarten providers located within Vermont, which may be adjusted regionally, that is established annually through a process jointly developed and implemented by the agencies of AOE and Human Services. So basically, the statewide rate that is for Vermont would be the same for those payments going outside the state. And then section 2 is requiring the state board who owns those rules, the pre-K rules, to open up the rules to comply with everything that we just walked through, including creating that definition for geographically isolated. And then the bill would take effect on July 1, 2026.
Curiosity question, because I don't know the answer. There's lots of folks in the State House who have all kinds of trouble with money going to schools which have a religious basis. The laws, this page 4, line 7, under the laws of New Hampshire. I don't know if New Hampshire has a different perspective on where their education money can go. We should see if we're bumping into something which at least needs visibility. That's
Can I say something? I mean, I think we currently, through a district, can provide pre-K dollars to like a church pre-K. I don't think we,
Good.
like if, I don't think you can like impose religious beliefs on kids, but I think we don't necessarily have the same issues with pre-K since it's a lot of independent schools where they can find space.
okay. That's a good thing. I just wondered if we were bumping into, just want to know if we were bumping into an anomaly that needs visibility.
There is a long line of First Amendment jurisprudence that is relative to this conversation that if you all are interested in having me in on, I would be happy to talk about it. But it is such a delicate topic and a topic that what you say can and will be used against you in a court of law that I would encourage you to just be very conscious of how we're having that conversation.
Other questions? So. So the only, the only thing that I have in my mind as we're finishing this walkthrough is that if we deem an area to be
Geographically
isolated, it's possible that it will emerge on the western side of the state. And if it is in fact geographically isolated, just like in Essex County, they probably don't have the same opportunity. So that's the only thing I would want to think about New York and Massachusetts.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
Might not happen, by the way.
what might
It
not?
might be that it's only Essex in the end. It gets the designation.
Right. And I'm sure other witnesses will
Yeah.
speak to why this is written so narrowly.
Yeah. Okay. And so, yeah, we look at that too. Yeah.
Is it prudent to task the Agency of Geographic Information to do a quick study?
Because we haven't defined it yet.
No, I know, when we get to that point, just to see if we have other areas, which, and again, just trying to be fair for all the counties.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's,
Right.
okay, so we just have that bank note, whatever, in. So. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
Would you like me to stick around?
It's up to you. I mean, it would probably be good if you've got
Sure.
time.
There's this many, but
Sure. No, I'll sit or whoever gets up next.
Yeah, who is up?
I assume there's a witness here.
Janet McCarthy.
I don't think.
Oh, it was on screen.
Sure.
Yeah.
Oh, well, if we're not having a live witness, then
That's true.
Brad Cooper. We'll just sit next to each other.
Good afternoon. Janet.
Hi there.
joining us. Just I guess just for all the witnesses, we should go around the room and introduce ourselves. Starting with Senator Hinsdale.
Oh,
Say hello.
hi, Senator Ron Hinsdale from Chittenden County.
Nana Hussein from Wyndham County.
Dave Weeks, representing Rutland County.
Seth Longroth, I represent the Bennington Senate District.
Terry Wiggins, representing Rutland County.
Steve Heffernan representing the Addison County District.
So with that, introduce yourself and the floor is yours.
Okay, great. Hi there. Good to be with you guys again. Janet McLaughlin. I'm the Deputy Commissioner within the Department for Children and Families that oversees the Child Development Division. And the Child Development Division is responsible for all things sort of childcare within the state of Vermont. We're responsible for Children's Integrated Services, which is, supports for children and young children and families who need extra supports like early intervention and home visiting. And we also co-administer universal pre-kindergarten along with the Agency of Education. So we are jointly responsible for pre-kindergarten education. And I didn't submit written testimony. I have notes, but as you guys know, this was a quick turnaround. But I've connected with Secretary Saunders. I talked with the AOE Chief Academic Officer, Aaron Davis, on this topic earlier today, just to make sure that we're fully aligned, and that I'm speaking on behalf of both agencies. And so relative to this bill, I have a few things to share as you guys are considering it. So and I'm going to just pull my notes over so that they're not looking off to the side. So the first thing is that we want to emphasize that we completely agree that the purpose of Vermont's universal pre-kindergarten law is to make sure that all Vermont children can get a high quality pre-kindergarten education experience before they enter kindergarten. We agree that this includes children who live on the border, and especially those who might be likely to go to kindergarten in other states. And we agree that they should have access to publicly funded pre-K. And we agree that there is a challenge, that there are some children who have not been able to access publicly funded pre-kindergarten in the same way as other children in Vermont, and that is a problem and that we should solve it. So agree on all of that. This is an issue that has come up before. We've talked about it. We had a pre-kindergarten education implementation committee that was laid out through Act 70 as part of Act 76 of 2023. And it came up there and it was kind of tied to some of the recommendations that came out there, but that didn't, there wasn't legislative action taken after that. So that hasn't adjusted there. And I think right now I have a few pieces of information I wanted to share with you guys. So, and I guess just a couple of thoughts. So one is just the belief again that any changes we're making to pre-kindergarten education should work in coordination with the larger pre-K to 12 education transformation overall. And as we think about creating new definitions, right, we need to, right, for geographically isolated and things like that, we need to, make sure that that is going to align with some of the bigger picture thinking for pre-K through 12, which sounds like that's some of the questions you got, some of the questions you've already been raising. And we know that there is for pre-K as a whole, and for pre-K and for pre-K specific, universal pre-kindergarten specifically, and for pre-K through 12, that there is additional work to be done right now, right, related to revisions to roles and responsibilities between the districts and the state. What is the right way to think about the administrative overhead associated with pre-kindergarten? And what is the appropriate payment to run a high quality pre-kindergarten education program, like whether or not that is run in a publicly operated program or in a community-based program. So, all of those questions, right, seem to be open right now and being asked by your colleagues. And so whatever is happening here, we would want to make sure, right, where everything is happening sort of in coordination. In coordination. The other thing I wanted to make sure that you all are aware of is that at the very end of 2025, so just last month, The Child Development Division, along with Agency of Education, Building Bright Futures, Department of Health, Department of Mental Health, we successfully secured a preschool development grant, Birth to Five systems building grant from the federal government. And it is designed to support multiple projects that strengthen early childhood education for Vermont families. And one project is going to be a focused consultant-supported process to develop a more streamlined, coherent statewide framework for UPK. We've already got the RFP out there for that consultant. And it is, there's 4 major goals to that. And so one is to improve access by ensuring UPK policies and supports work consistently for families in every region or district in the state and across program types. A second goal is to clarify and align UPK governance, funding, and expectations across agencies and settings. Again, so that public schools, community-based programs, family childcare, Head Start partners, we're all operating, right, with this coherent framework, that we're reducing the administrative burden and duplication that there might be by identifying any unnecessary differences in the oversight and monitoring, and to create sort of a foundation. The fourth goal was to create a foundation for shared UPK data governance and integration so that we can track participation, quality, and outcomes across our mixed delivery universal pre-kindergarten system. So I just want you to know, like, I guess the point is we are kind of like deeply thinking about the pre-kindergarten system as a whole. And we have, a body of work already planned this year associated with that. And that body of work is really deeply informed by the work we did in the pre-kindergarten committee, by the conversations related to education transformation, by the Vermont Early Childhood Strategic Plan. So wanted you guys to be aware of that. And that work will include, will be sort of guided by an interagency team that's CDD, AOE, and also our partners at Building Bright Futures. And then we're going to also have a steering committee that would include sort of statewide and local leaders, school district, community-based and home-based universal pre-kindergarten partners, Head Start partners. So gonna be, I think there's going to be a forum to really have these, to like have these conversations and make sure we are getting to this place where we are achieving our goal of making sure that every Vermont pre-kindergarten student who wants it can have access to that high quality education. So then I would offer that specific to this very specific bill, I think one of the challenges in the past of why this isn't happening already, like why isn't this already solved, has been around the ways that we pre-qualify pre-kindergarten programs across the state. And so we do think it's achievable for AOE and CDD to identify ways that are comparable to what we have in Vermont to qualify for kindergarten providers in other states in these limited circumstances when there's not a reasonable option right in there in Vermont. And I'll give a couple examples of that. So like right now, the pre-kindergarten pre-qualification standards say that you need to participate in Vermont's STARS quality recognition system and you need to be at a level 4 or a level 5. Well, New Hampshire programs don't participate, I mean, we don't have a vehicle for New Hampshire programs to participate in STARS. They probably, or New York or Massachusetts, they have their own systems of quality. And it's doing the work of mapping those and saying, close enough. We also know there's places where, it might be that the child is going to attend kindergarten at that public school, but we don't have a way to get them access to pre-kindergarten right now. And again, maybe we can think about that standard, maybe there's just a pretty clear, just like, oh, if it's a K-12 school and they're offering pre-K and that's where that kid's going to go for K with Vermont money, maybe we can just make it a really simple fast lane right there. And then there's other details that we have associated with universal pre-kindergarten. Like we have a requirement for an individual child level assessment using a very specific tool, Teaching Strategies Gold, which again, a New Hampshire program, right? If they only have a few Vermont children in it, like and that's not the assessment that that school already uses, you know, we need to work out those sorts of details. But I would just say from in talking with our partners at AOE, you know, we do think that those details can be worked out. I think in looking together, we feel like we can't quite comment yet on the specific directions in the bill related to sort of defining geographically isolated districts. And again, would want to think about that in terms of implications related to other parts of the pre-K to 12 system. We also think we could look at data related to kindergarten enrollment on those border communities, and also look at some of the data that we have related to childcare financial assistance use in programs that are based in New Hampshire or Massachusetts or New York, because we do already do that. We do allow Vermont families to use their childcare financial assistance benefits at another where they can find a spot if that's out of state. We would also think we also really would want to look at, we know we need to be looking at the requirements related to the money, right? Related to the statewide tuition rate, ADM, how the money flows. That for pre-kindergarten, that's definitely an area of where we need to do some initial analysis. That's part of what the analysis we're hoping to do with the consulting piece of it. And so as I think about the tuition rate that we have for community-based programs in Vermont, or for we know that doesn't necessarily cover costs right now. And so I think if this bill were to move forward, we want to make sure that whatever we're putting forward was could allow for to make it sufficient, right? Because if we say, oh, you can take your benefit and it's $4,000 a year, well, if nobody in New Hampshire is willing to take that much money to offer the 10 hours of pre-K, then we haven't actually achieved access, right, for those children. So that's just another piece of it to consider. But that's what I just wanted to pop in to offer from how the administration is taking a look at this bill, just from as a first look.
Thank you. I've got some thoughts. I want to let you go first. You went first.
Yeah. So Janet, thank you.
Sir.
Said a lot. It's Friday afternoon. Thank you. I'm just curious. Thank you. I'm just curious. At like 10,000 feet, if the Department of Children and Families supports at least the intent of S-214.
Yeah, the intent of making sure that, yes, that all Vermont children can have access to a publicly funded pre-kindergarten education. Yes.
Thank you. So as I listen to you talk, it sounds like all the pieces and all the thinking that you're doing and all the rules that would come would end up taking some time. And I'm thinking about kids who don't have pre-K now.
Mm-hmm.
And it's too late for this year, but it seems to me, just admittedly thinking out loud here a little bit, that we need to find a way for this to happen in whatever form by next August. Like, period, we need to do something so that those kids who have no access now have access. And so I am even thinking that even given some of the things you want to consider and look at, I go, okay, that's fine. But we need to do something in the interim. And even if it's a little messy, it doesn't, we haven't had all the review of the schools or whatever. It seems to me that it's, there's a true urgency here as it relates to what may only be 10 or 15 kids. I don't even know. But, so I'm wondering what one possibility is we do this in some form and sunset in 2 years, or something like that. So that it's at least there and then it can get taken out. How long would it take you, just ask this question, should it's not, doesn't appear the way it's written, doesn't have to be by rule, if I'm reading it correctly, to come up with a definition that would be workable for the geographically isolated school district that we have? We just actually, as it turns out, got the recommendations or the report from the board as it relates to schools in Vermont, that, you know, or if you could go up with that, but it seems to me
Mhm.
that we need to make this happen for next August, like, period.
So to your question, I think, yeah, that's definitely a place where I'd want to make sure I'm coordinating with my agent, the Agency of Education colleagues on that, on that piece of it to make sure. But I do agree that those children, right, they're only 3 and 4 for 2 years. So, that's a short period of time for those very specific, for those children.
Senator Hufford.
I want to echo just what you just put out for how many, for how this is going to affect the state, for how many children that's probably going to actually use this. Time is of the essence, and you gave a very long reason why it may have to wait, but you can see here in this committee that I believe we feel it's more urgent. And that I just ask that you work with us to make sure that we get this done.
If I can respond, I think I didn't necessarily mean to say that it imply that this absolutely has to wait. I just wanted to make sure that whatever is being done is that, you know, that eye is being kept to how does this potentially interact with the other parts of other legislation that is potentially moving this session. And this is a place where we agree that, you know, we can't let perfect be the enemy of much better.
Senator Williams.
I was just thinking, you know, you do anything with a rule or session law?
Yeah, that's what, yeah, we could do something that is first for 2 years.
I mean, waiting for other things to happen is never a good policy in this building.
Yes.
Yeah, well, we're splitting time between whatever it is, 7 kids or 12 kids. I couldn't see the hand signals over there. Six, maybe 7. Versus the 80,000 kids we're dealing with Act 73. You know, sometimes we're just gonna have to, like, you know, pull lever, believe, sunset, move forward. We've got big fish to fry. But I do support the concept.
So if we were going to go forward with this, let me just ask you, maybe thinking about this in order to come back to us. If we were going to go forward with this bill, are there any, and we were going to do it, let's just say for the sake of discussion here, sunset it in 2 years. Is there anything that you believe is that we must work into this? Because I think frankly, thinking about it in the context of Act 73 is probably not what we have time to do with this. We can be thinking about it as we go forward with Act 73. But in the meantime, we got to make sure we're ready for next August. So that's a long, so if you, if there are some things that you believe must be in here in order for this to work, let us know what they are.
Okay, I'll get back with our colleagues at AOE and we can get back to you. I think one of the things that's coming to mind for me is thinking about the operating districts versus non-operating districts, and does that play into thinking through the way the funding flows? Again, with the point I was making at the end of making, if the goal is to ensure access, we need to make sure that the funding, you know, is sufficient to actually ensure access.
Okay. Good.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. And you know,
Okay.
by the way, your points are all well taken in the longer run. And so thank you for coming in.
Yep. Thanks for having me.
Have a good weekend.
Yeah. There it is. So Karen Roach.
Hello again. Seems like it was just day before yesterday that I was here. So for the record, my name is Erin Roach, and I'm the Vermont Director of First Children's Finance. And thank you for having me here again. I hope to provide a little bit of data for you about the availability of preschool and universal pre-kindergarten throughout the state and by county. And I have a few questions about S214 as I reviewed it last night that I hope might be helpful as you consider the legislation. And some of those questions have already come up in this past half hour or so. So to the data, I guess. As part of our 2026 childcare supply and demand gap analysis, which I talked about a couple days ago, First Children's Finance produced several supplemental data briefs that were outside the scope of that full-time childcare analysis, but we thought they were of interest for a better understanding of the whole ecosystem of regulated childcare. And also acknowledging that families and young children have different needs, and our childcare ecosystem should offer a variety of settings to best meet every family's needs. So I'm going to talk a little bit about, and I shared with you the very brief report about preschool and universal pre-K. But I did also want to note that Building Bright Futures and the state of Vermont's Department for Children and Families Child Development Division played an important role in the sort of creation and fine tuning of all of these reports, and also in helping us see the value of these supplemental briefs. And so I wanted to acknowledge my gratitude for their partnership and expertise in all of this. So without further ado, I'm going to share with the committee our supplemental brief that's titled Characteristics of Preschool Capacity in Vermont. I'm going to share the relevant, oh, I can't share. But if I can share, I'll share the relevant page with you. Here we go. So that everyone can see. Okay. So the main report that we talked about the other day focuses on full-time childcare. This supplement focuses on preschool only, whether it's full-time or part-time, whether it's at a public school, whether it's universal pre-K, it's preschool. And so the table that I have here shows the first column on the left is the county. The second column from the left is the total preschool age children in that county. I want to note that this data comes from the Department of Health. This data is from July 2024, which was the most recent available data at the time that we were doing this analysis. So just want to make sure everyone is clear that these numbers are from July 2024. So you can see how many children, 3 and 4-year-olds, there are in each county and how many there are statewide. So there's 11,000 in the state. Essex County has 111 3 and 4-year-olds, while Chittenden County has almost 3,000. And then we show the total preschool licensed capacity, all the regulated preschools, like I said, full-time, part-time, public schools, and how many spaces they are licensed for. I want to note that just about every county has more licensed spaces than they have 3 and 4-year-olds currently, or July 2024, with 3 exceptions. Those are Essex, Franklin, and Grand Isle County, which have a little less licensed capacity for preschool in regulated care. So I wanted to show that table in case that is helpful to you as you're considering this legislation. And then the other thing I wanted to show you is on the next page, table 3, which is specifically about universal pre-K. So again, the first column on the left is the county. The second column from the left is the licensed capacity of universal pre-K spaces, right? These are 10 hours a week. These are, as Janet, as a Deputy Commissioner McLaughlin talked about, these meet requirements set out by the state. And so not every preschool can be a universal pre-K provider. So I thought it would be helpful for you to understand that, for example, in Essex County, there are 95 universal pre-K spaces. remember on the previous table, I think we said there were 111 3 and 4-year-olds. So I thought that was useful to note. I also think it's useful to note that Grand Isle has 84 licensed universal pre-K spaces, and I don't remember the number, 138 3 and 4-year-olds. So anyway, I thought that was relevant information about the sort of availability of preschool and universal pre-kindergarten spaces in the state. Yeah, so that's the data I was going to share. Happy to answer any questions. I also had a few questions in my written testimony that I wanted to pose.
Well, there's a
So-
question first about
Yeah.
the data, so let's do that.
Of course, yeah.
So Erin, you don't do mapping.
And, I mean, we sometimes have maps, but I'm not like a GIS expert.
Okay, because the unique nature of Essex County is that it's such a large landmass.
Mhm.
So your data doesn't tell us a real story, unfortunately, I think, about Essex County. It's unclear where those spaces are versus where people live and how far they would have to drive and how far away that is from work. I would say juxtapose that with Grand Isle County. I don't want to speak for them being in Chittenden County, but we do know a lot of people in Grand Isle County are kind of used to traveling off the island to Franklin or Chittenden for work or for their other needs.
Yes, I present this only as data. It was not, this report was published several weeks ago. It was not specifically produced to address this issue or this legislation. It was really to get a better idea of preschool and universal pre-kindergarten and sort of the part-time and full-time nature of those spaces. So I'm not trying to suggest that Essex County does or does not have a distance to travel to.
And you don't know that, like, that's not data you would ever monitor or track.
No, the state does have a lovely website with a map of where every regulated childcare or preschool is in the state. I'm not sure that that's appropriate to measure distances or how long it would take to travel on a road, but there are maps that do exist, and so if one were to bring in an expert in like travel patterns and things like that, that might be obtainable.
So you said you had any other questions about the data? So you said you had some questions?
Yeah, I reviewed the legislation yesterday, and so I just wanted to raise a couple of things, and again, some of these have come up already, so I'll just quickly run through them. So the legislation specifically references New Hampshire schools, but it doesn't call out a specific Vermont county or community. It's become clear that this is really referencing Essex County. So the question that I had is, if there was insufficient access to universal pre-kindergarten in a county that borders New York, for example, or Massachusetts, then this law wouldn't accommodate that. And I was wondering if there is a specific Vermont county that this is really focused on, and if there is, should we state that explicitly in the legislation? And I wondered if making this same accommodation to other school districts in other parts of the state wouldn't be a sort of equitable way to look at this. But anyway, that's already come up today. So I just wanted to state that sort of for the record. And the second question also came up earlier, which is that I'm not familiar with New Hampshire or any other border states' universal pre-kindergarten requirements or their criteria for providing pre-kindergarten. And I wondered if we have evidence that these programs would meet or exceed Vermont standards. And I think Deputy Commissioner McLaughlin spoke to the need for better understanding that. So that was something to consider. And And also, I wanted to say that I'm aware that other committees in the legislature are thinking about education transformation and other changes to universal pre-kindergarten. And I wondered how the need for this legislation would be affected by that. I think you all have talked about that while I've been listening. And then the last question that I had, which is maybe just curiosity on my part, is I wondered how many children this legislation would impact each year. I believe that every Vermont child deserves access to pre-kindergarten, and I think it would be helpful to understand like the expected scale and scope of this legislation. So anyway, those were my questions and sort of my reflections on reading the draft legislation. And yeah, if there's any other questions for me, I'm happy to answer them. Or anything else that you need from me.
I don't see any others, but that was helpful. Do we have those statistics? Do we have that draft?
The report that I was showing, yeah, it was in the documents
Okay.
that I provided today.
Okay.
Okay. Well,
Thank you.
thank you for having me. I appreciate all of your efforts for the people of Vermont. So thank you.
Thank you. So Morgan Crossman can't be here. I think she said that she thinks everybody else will cover what she was like to do and said anyway. So we have Sharon Ellington.
Ellen Wood.
Kelly Wood, I'm sorry.
I think I made that mistake.
Actually, no, actually,
Thank
thank you.
That's all written.
It's not going to be on your shirt.
Hi. Everybody, I wrote some testimony. I'd like to read it, although you have it. Thank you, Chairman Bogart.
I'm just, like, the computer screen is so big that on screen, you're almost eclipsed in case you wanted to move your computer screen while you do your written. I'm conscious of that because it's like,
Thank you.
yeah,
Better?
There you are.
if you
Yeah.
want, yeah.
That
It might look better eclipsed.
People see.
For the
In
record,
case you don't want to show your face, I should.
for the record, my name is Sharon Ellingwood. Thank you, Chairman Bogart and the committee. It's never been more of an honor to come talk about S2 14. I'm really excited. As you know, I serve on the NEK Choice School Board. I go over this when I testify for anybody who's listening who is not familiar with Essex County. NEK Choice member towns are Norton, Leamington, Bloomfield, Brunswick, Maidstone, Guildhall, Granby, East Haven, Kirby, and Victory, Vermont. 9 of our 10 towns have a population density of less than 7 people per square mile. We are micro-rural and we are geographically isolated by many, many thousands of acres of state and federal and easy lands in Essex County. We are geographically isolated on the other side of that preserved land along the Connecticut River, bordering New Hampshire. Some of us toward Kirby, Kirby's actually in Caledonia County. I'm submitting this testimony to urge the committee to correct an inadvertent statutory barrier that has prevented children in geographically isolated areas from accessing universal pre-K. I also urge the committee to address this issue now through S214 rather than deferring it to broader education reform efforts. Along the Connecticut River, students frequently access K-12 education out of state anyway. This pattern is not based on convenience, but on necessity. School choice in this region functions as a lifeline. It aligns with where parents work. Childcare and after-school care are available where grandparents provide many facets of support and where families receive medical care and where winter travel is the safest and the shortest. Our towns are very small and local economies are fragile, often with municipal budgets of less than $75,000 for the entire town budget. There are no sidewalks, there are no roads, there's no water. Most are volunteer or small stipend positions in town government. Because of a technicality and statutory barrier, because of a technical statutory barrier, we currently have geographically isolated students in kindergarten from kindergarten through 10th grade. We have 10 grades of kids right now in school that we are paying tuition for that didn't get pre-K, that missed 2 very important years of early intervention. That's how many students it's impacting right now. It's gone 10 years. I don't believe any area of the state would have let this go on 10 years. It's really important to me to say that. For the next years, we need to recognize this and that we have a lot of current students who have been excluded from this due to this oversight. Tuition agreements and infrastructure already exist to support those Vermont students going from K to 12 in New Hampshire, but there's no comparable mechanism for pre-K. The statutory inconsistency permits out-of-state attendance for K to 12, but denying access to universal pre-K. And I know this inconsistency was not the clear intent of a very hardworking legislature 10 years ago with Act 166. The barrier I'm describing isn't philosophical, it's technical on language that other folks today have explained with Department of Children and Family STARS quality ratings and the use of Vermont licensed early childhood educators. And I'll leave that testimony to the experts there that have been clear today. These requirements can't be met in New Hampshire as these are certifications and licenses of Vermont specific. For geographically isolated districts with no in-state options, this has gone on again for a decade. My recommendation is a waiver at the local level to determine if the child's in a pre-K desert and allow current seamless tuition agreements to continue because we already have tuition agreements with most of the schools they're going to for the K to 12 tuition. It's really a turnkey thing. We already write checks to these people, to these schools. I remind that our taxpayers have contributed to funding universal pre-K access for other children throughout the state while ours have gone without. Based on historic district level data, we estimate that an average of 7 students per year are directly impacted. In a small district, that number is significant. When you have 7 students a year who have not had any early intervention, it impacts budgeting and other concerns. We often don't know how many kindergarten students are going to arrive in our next year's budget because we're not seeing them in pre-K. And when you don't know you have a student and you've underestimated by 7 or 3 or even one student that may require some specific interventions can really inflate your budget. The volatility of that budgeting burden falls on our taxpayers. And Essex County is the home of the most elderly residents in Vermont per capita by county. They're on fixed incomes and they're living in poverty. And I'm very concerned about that. Excess spending thresholds in education have penalized districts by going over, the per pupil spending for students that didn't get this early access. So they're missing it. We're over our targets on per pupil spending, and we're penalized for circumstances that for 10 years we have been unable to reasonably predict or prevent. Early childhood education is one of the most effective tools to reduce downstream education and health costs to support workforce participation in stabilized communities. I respectfully caution the committee against delaying this fix by folding it into potential Act 73 changes. Large reform efforts are complex and slow moving. Deputy Secretary McLaughlin spoke of RFPs and, getting together with focus groups, with Head Starts and schools. And I would like to point out that we don't have Head Starts and we don't have schools, and an RFP to bring those people in to solve this problem for us are places that don't exist. I love being a subject matter expert on my district with every school board member. So I did just want to point that out. This is a very targeted and responsible correction. It aligns statute with intent. It reflects the rural reality and addresses a problem that's been well documented for over 10 years. Strongly urge you to advance S214 the best you can and remove this inadvertent barrier. My colleague Martha Vanderwalk came in this with me. A final question is, what if there are no pre-Ks that meet Vermont standards? Does this mean we can't go at all? And that's, where we are. I have maps and data, and I'm here for any of your questions. Thank you.
Just a comment, I don't want to speak for Morgan Crossman, but because Building Bright Futures is really trying to get every child pre-K because they know how important it is, I think she was more going to echo this testimony than others. She had helped with the drafting, recognizing that people have had all these technical questions for years, but also recognizing that it has been a long time. So I just wanted, I don't think Morgan was gonna come ask those same other questions again. I think she was gonna say, like, we've been trying to narrow this bill so that it works for Essex County.
I want to speak for other areas in Grand Isle or Southern Vermont that have this issue. I think the data, the most recent data that showed how dismal our numbers were shows I don't think it's big. I would guess it's not as big a problem in those other areas, but those children are important as well. I would like to say that. And, you know, I really appreciate the way you thoughtfully recognize that this is an urgent issue, not one we can delay because we're already chasing 10 years of equity. Thank you.
I have come, but it also seems to me that it, that New Hampshire doesn't the requirements. They also they are better, and they may just be different.
They may be better than ours.
They may be better. They may just be different.
Yeah.
And then, frankly, if we're talking about something in the short term to get us to bridge until, I guess we want to know, but I'm not.
Some pre-K is better than no
Yeah,
pre-K.
no,
We can't.
Yeah.
We have a saying where I work that you can't let process eat action for lunch in some cases. And, you know, the process of going through that minutia, when we all know in this room the value of those first 2 years, economically, financially, social, emotional, learning, and tax impacts. It's critical.
yes, I
It's
think we're back.
critical.
Thank you. I think we're back to where we sort of started with this. We have to just figure out whether we're talking about this one little area that has the most acutely. Make sure we fix that. Then, but maybe pick up a couple of other places that have the same thing, but also not get bogged down and get in. So we have that's the effect.
I brought this, I always bring this, and you can see across the table, geographic isolation. Those
Mhm.
green and orange lands are state, federal, and east lands. And in other municipalities, you don't see this giant swath. And that's what we're talking about this river. And these are the places our kids are being educated anyway, but they can't get to pre-K. Like, this is an older man.
I know a lot about natural forests.
Yeah.
So they can. Yeah.
So it's a great visual.
Yeah.
I made this. So I would love to make a map of the data that was in that line. I wrote that down and that's Erin wrote for her data. I'd love to map that because having the 2 pre-Ks, I guarantee you the 2 pre-Ks are over here. Which leaves 0.
Yeah.
Okay, and that's. Okay, I bet you're
Thank you,
right.
exactly.
Martha.
Yeah, I was gonna
Thank
say.
you.
It's like,
Tina does have a wonderful pre-K that serves kids up in that area.
So I think we asked Janet to be thinking about, Jennifer Bluffton, the deputy commissioner, to be thinking about what must get included in this even if it's for a couple of years. And I think maybe Sarah will be thinking about.
I mean, the only other concrete suggestion I heard was just to write Essex County if we need Essex County. That's the alternative to including just New Hampshire versus other border states. I mean, my intent right now is Essex County because there's no other map in the state that looks like that.
Yeah. We have those 2 other counties that have the deficiency, right? One that, what was it? Franklin and.
It was less of a clear definition.
Yeah. So. Yeah, but this is just how do we get at whether I don't want to get bogged down.
Yeah.
I want to make sure we get it out.
Right.
But we might want to think about how we get at that definition quickly and then see what
Right.
it does.
I mean, like, I know Albert just opened a big childcare center to help solve this problem. Like, we can ask those other counties if this solution helps them, but I think they have other solutions they're working on that don't involve Chazy, New York, or
Well, you know what? You just sort of thought, and Maybe the difference is that it is unsolvable in Essex.
It's just, that's the thing, Franklin and Greta are working on
Yeah.
this.
So that's a fair.
I have been celebrating their work too.
Yeah.
This is not solvable
Yeah.
with another facility
Yeah.
somewhere.
So we'll be back to this.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. People want to break. Yes. Right. Go.
It's
Go.
Brian
Hey, Brad,
this
you
week,
rather-
or, but I
Oh,
hope you felt really, that it was valuable for you to be here. Many of us have done your drive now. It's not walk a mile in their shoes in Vermont, it's drive 100 miles on their commute. So thank you for coming all this way and highlighting that it's been a decade issue.
Yeah, for what it's worth, we moved to Canaan partly because of the weather. It took me 5.5 hours.
Yeah,
3 hours the other day.
right. I would say, like, for AOE's benefit, having people sitting in the room who do that kind of drive and then hearing like, we have a process and you can come to meetings. We have to really get up there and see how hard that is to hear. I think that, like, just come to a meeting where
A steering committee of schools and Head Starts and that kind of thing doesn't reach non-operating.
yeah.
This is one of those instances where one level we're both right.
Sure.
One
I
has
just
to
like,
have-
you know,
one has
I
to
think
have the
Janet
other.
gets it, but it's like,
Yeah.
go have a meeting in Canaan if you're gonna have a consultant meeting. You know?
So-
It's like-
Jen, did you come back on? You wanted to say something? You're still muted.
I did, yes, I'm still here. I'm still listening. And I just wanted, I guess, I just hope that what you did hear, people are taking away is we totally agree that all Vermont children should have access to pre-kindergarten education. We think this is not that complicated to solve. I wanted you to be aware that there is this other work related to pre-kindergarten education, and to make the broader point that I thought the solution the idea that you came up with potentially about like, is this a 2-year thing? Like, I just wanted to make the point of the fact that this is integrated with other pieces. But I agree. The big picture consulting around the overall framework for universal pre-kindergarten is not necessarily the answer to Essex County, but I just wanted to put the work in context a little bit. That's all. So.
All right. And thank you. And point well taken. So thank you. Okay, well, we have to move on. But thanks for coming in.
Thank you.
Everybody.
Maybe you came on before that.
Maybe.
Oh, gosh.
No.
We'll put this back up. This will be back on the agenda quickly.
I'm trying.
So we're on to S232. I think we're starting with we're starting with a new draft.
They do not
See,
have a
you're
new
first
draft
on the- first on the agenda.
bill, but yes, that would probably be for a walkthrough.
Oh, that's right. We can do the walkthrough. That's exactly, of course. Yes. For the latest in the draft. I think we have, but he has a hard topic to work with. Yes.
Welcome. All right.
Yes.
Well, good afternoon, Tucker Anderson Legislative Council. You have in front of you S232. You've already heard some excellent testimony about the contents of the bill. What I'll do is do a high-level walkthrough for you, touch down on a couple specific legal points within the bill, and then answer any questions you might have about the words on the page. One thing that I'll note up front, S232 contains actually very few substantive changes in state law. And for the most part, adds inclusive clauses calling out public libraries in lists of either nonprofit or governmental corporations that already qualify for certain forms of grants. So if you are with me, I'll skip through the findings. Findings are typically not vetted by legislative council. They are your legislative findings. So unless you have specific legal questions about the findings on the page here, we'll go right into section 2. Is on page 3, starting on line 5, establishes Vermont Libraries Day as the third Monday in the month of October. You have already heard this from Senator Ricciardi, but this does not add this to the list of paid state holidays. This is just recognizing this day instead. And in section 316 VSA, section 51 is amended in subdivision.
Sorry.
A2.
Where does this live in statute then? Is it live with like Green Up Day? Okay, so like
Yes.
fun state holidays.
State
Okay.
recognized days, but not
Okay.
state holidays. Yes. In section 3, the Universal After School and Summer Special Fund section is amended in subdivision A2 to state that cannabis sales tax revenue shall be used to support mixed delivery system for after school and summer programming. And the new language adds public libraries and an including clause to the list of eligible recipients. That is not a substantive change. However, the sentence that follows states that a reasonable portion of funding shall be allocated to the Department of Libraries to support the statewide summer reading program and grants for after-school activities in libraries. One thing that I would flag here is that there is no standard for what reasonable is. And specifically in this context, what would qualify as a reasonable portion of that funding. So one thing that I would suggest the committee look at and take testimony on is what is the portion of funding that goes to libraries under this program?
Sorry, in this statute, is there somebody authorized to determine that?
Yes,
Who's that?
the Secretary of Education determines.
Because they manage the fund.
Yes.
Okay.
So looking at this section, the line that says eligible recipients can be public funders, nonprofit organizations. That would include public libraries without saying public libraries. And so the only reason we're saying public libraries there is to set up the next sentence.
Right, and to call out for those who are applying for the grants that yes, libraries do qualify. So part of the inclusion of these including clauses, from my understanding, is to point out to the libraries that yes, in fact, you do qualify and you may apply for
Because they, for whatever reason, might have thought they didn't.
correct.
Even though they're public, good, correct. All right, good.
Still within the same section, there's an advisory committee that works on these after school funding programs. And it's section T under the membership, the state librarian or designee is added as the 9th member of that advisory committee. So on page 4, as long as we're all still together, moving into section 4, which meant 16 VSA section 4014 related to early education funding. Subsection B, public libraries are added expressly in the list of community organizations that qualify. That's all in that section. All right. Move along, we're already halfway through. This is very efficient. On page 5, in section 5, we're moving into the duties and functions of the Department of Libraries in 22 VSA section 605. Cover this at a high level. Much of what you're seeing on this page is just adding digital to the term collection in order to clarify that the collections that are maintained by the department can also include digital electronic materials in addition to physical materials. I know that there is a recommendation from the department that's posted on the committee's information page around changing conjunctions from or to and. Doesn't change substantively what's happening here unless it's a mandate, in which case or is discretionary and is mandatory.
Yeah, that's, I wanted to get back to that because having and requires them to have both. And I'm not sure that's really the intent of what we want to do. We want to have one or the other, not necessarily have two full set for access to everything.
The specific clause that is called out in what the department submitted is a discretionary clause where and would not change that discretion. But one thing that I would point out broadly with the language you all work on is that or is not always disjunctive, meaning it doesn't require a choice between the two. It is often, in fact, conjunctive. So if you want to parse that out in the future, you can always say either or in order to make it disjunctive, or say any combination of the preceding. All right. I always bring a lot of because I think this on page 6 in section 6, other duties and functions of the department, we have an entirely new subdivision that's added to this list of the Department of Libraries duties. This requires the department publish guidance documents concerning current grants and programs that are available for the support of municipal public libraries and to post them on the website. The second sentence requires the department to consult with the Vermont Bond Bank to publish guidance concerning municipal bonding for the improvement of public libraries. So this goes with some of the preceding sections that I was talking about, where there's no substantive change in the public libraries being listed in the eligible recipients of grants. And perhaps the intent here is that the guidance document that will further clarify for libraries that yes, they are eligible for these grants. Yes, they are eligible for bonding opportunities at the municipal level.
I think I see that question.
Yeah, I have a question about something that's not a proposal of amendment. At the top of page 6, didn't someone say we should look at the word book wagon for some reason? Like we don't have book wagons. I think book wagons would be great, but were we asked to change that?
Yes, in fact, there's a document posted on the committee's information page from the state librarian that suggests amending and updating some of this language. That's in the preceding section, 605, for the duties of the Department of Libraries, and the system is interlibrary law.
Typically, yes. Okay. What about like a mobile book wagon? Like,
There was one when I was a child. but I don't
okay,
know
like the ice cream trucks. Yeah.
There are.
I'll wait for that later. I didn't know there were ones when you were a child.
The last decade testified in this committee multiple times about where I grew up, which is smallest town in Massachusetts. There was a book wagon because the library was smaller than this committee room. So most of the books I read as a child came in a van. But anyway. Section 7 amends 24 VSA section 1752A related to bonding for libraries. Now, in the preceding sections for 1752A, it is expressly called out that municipal corporations have the authority to bond for their municipal buildings, which would include municipal libraries. Section 1752A clarified that they could also bond for the libraries that they support but don't own. So already in statute, all libraries are covered for purposes of municipal bonding. The amendments in section 7 further clarify that yes, public libraries, any public library, municipality can bond for improvements to those facilities. Which moves us on to page 7. We're going to get into a couple of sections that deal with grant programs around planning and development. Section 8, 24 VSA, section 2783 is amended. This is within a chapter that covers economic development performance grants. The service provider references that you see, it is a general term that it refers to only two possible entities, either the RDCs or regional planning commissions, or your economic development corporations, which are nonprofit organizations that meet a specific definition for purposes of this grant program. This adds a new subdivision 10 to this section. For eligibility for these grants, that the secretary, this is the secretary of the CCD here, shall enter into a performance grant with a service provider if the service provider demonstrates a capability and willingness to assist public libraries, encourage the development of growth programs and services at public libraries, and increase awareness of the resources available through public libraries within the service area. This puts it out there as a requirement for eligibility for this grant that the libraries be taken into consideration whenever these service providers are developing the economic development plan that would be covered by the grant.
So which secretary?
KCCD.
Okay. Here. They have community development, that's right as well.
We're at the bottom of page 7. We're going to move real swift to page 8. By section 9, 24 VSA, section 43.7 is amended. This relates to the municipal bylaw modernization grants, another RPC affiliated grant program, and subsection F of that section. The bill proposes to add new language to subdivision 8, which would require, for purposes of eligibility, that a municipality update their municipal plans, utility and facility element as provided in subdivision 4382A4 of Title 24 related to addressing present and prospective library facilities, resources, and services, and update the municipality's recommendations for meeting future needs for library facilities and services. Most of the language that you're seeing in that subdivision 8 already exists elsewhere, specifically within the municipal plan statutes. It is a requirement for certain types of facilities to be taken into account as part of the municipal plan. And here, just the library part of that 4382A4 is transported over as a requirement for the grant. Municipalities must have updated that part of their plan prior to applying for the grant. That's all you have within the four corners of S232. Happy to tell you more about my childhood library.
What's the town?
Sounds like pretty quick.
Town is called Sandusfield, Massachusetts. And
Sandusfield.
Sandusfield.
Sandus.
Oh, dishonored my beautiful
I don't, you have to pronounce it correctly.
Sandusfield, and it didn't have a library. And my grandfather in the 1940s donated the land and built basically a closet to hold some books. And the plaque that they put outside the library for him is bigger than any part of the library. But shout out to Sandusfield, 400 permanent residents, 2 hydroelectric dams, and a lot of state forest.
So we, in the end, this bill has 2 substances that change things a little bit. One of them is that a reasonable portion must go to libraries, and the other is the library day.
And I would say that the grant programs are also operative changes because they changed the eligibility requirements for those grant programs. Okay, yes.
Yeah, I mean, so I would say, right, I just want to flag, and I don't know if Catherine wants to speak to the importance of this, but that is asking a lot of communities that need to update their bylaws, and economic development and natural resources are probably gonna have conversations about bylaw modernization. I guess I would just flag that I need to hear more that this is the right year to add a new requirement to bylaw modernization, because we want them to have bylaws as soon as possible to participate in some other legislation. So I think that section would need to get it sent to one of the 2 committees of jurisdiction on bylaw modernization. And I just would need to hear that it's critical right now.
Okay, one thing that I wanted to make sure that I flagged for you as well is that the state librarian has in the document posted on your committee page recommended the committee take a look at the definition of public library and some of the changes from just last session or the session before around the use of the term public library with respect to the governing bodies that are articulated in municipal control over certain types of libraries. I wanted to flag you this is an issue that has been brought to my attention several times just over the last month with specifically library corporations that are privately owned but municipally supported. And there is some language in the library statutes right now that could be read to allow municipalities to appoint the trustees of libraries that accept municipal appropriations, but that are private entities. And so, something that
That's there already as an issue.
it is not addressed in S-232 right now, but it is something that has been flagged frequently over the last month. It's got the legislative council's attention.
We should look at that then, because it is potentially initiatives upon us upon some libraries, because so many of the ones libraries are nonprofits. And some of them are that sort of nonprofits that they do get some municipal support. Would that include just voting support? Or
It could, yes. As soon as you get into the municipal appropriations supporting the library, that's where the hook is in those statutes. And because of the definition of public library and its use following, I can't remember the number of the act, the statutes could be read to allow the legislative body of the municipality to appoint the trustees.
would it be, could you come back to us with some language to fix that?
Clarify.
So clarify it and to the extent or to the effect that you do not want that to trigger.
And if it's what the committee wants, I could consult with the state librarian on the recommendations that were included in the department's document on your committee information page. And the background is very muddled and confusing around the types of libraries, mostly because there are many library corporations that were chartered by the General Assembly under special law. And there are also library corporations that can organize under general law.
It's been around so long.
Yes, and there are
Yes.
private libraries, there are library associations, and then there are municipal libraries.
Well, we don't want to make it harder for those people who are, those organizations that are doing so much in the community. We don't want to make it harder, which means we want to
Thank
give
you
them the
all.
flexibility they need. So yeah, if you could do that for us, that would be great.
Thank you for your time. Appreciate all of you.
Because while you're here, Tucker, sorry, because you cover so many
You
different,
didn't quite make it.
I know, right? Well, this is like a gut check because Tucker covers all kinds of jurisdictions that make the committee. I think right now this would have to go to Economic Development, GovOps, and Finance after us. Because it has ACCD, it has, municipal bylaws, and it has, tax.
But has bylaws would have to go to that group. So
And so, yeah, so I'm just saying, like,
could be classified.
it's a lot of issues that aren't necessarily our specialty.
That's what we would want to give this work into.
That's actually more of an issue for you all.
Right, I didn't know if you like,
As far as,
if we move something out of a committee and I didn't realize it, you're aware of that, but.
I'm not aware of any requirements of the Senate rules that the jurisdictional charges of the other committees require commitment. I believe that that's a vote that is taken by the body on the floor. But if the other committees wanted to take a look at this, I would be happy to do the drive-by with them.
Right.
Talk about
I mean, it's
wonderful
definitely going to
grant
finance.
programs.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And cannabis, that's econ, so yeah, it's a lot.
Yes. Oh, you're not. You're up.
Am I?
Yeah.
Okay,
Are you happy?
I'm Catherine.
Okay, it's like, well, yeah.
I got confused with somebody else who put it up. Wasn't you?
I'm Catherine Delnau, the state librarian and commissioner of the Department of Libraries. Some of what you've received from me is really just responding to the questions, primarily from Senator Weeks. I apologize for the two things having a very similar cover. We're trying to make them look
uniform, but they look so uniform, you may not be able to tell the difference. So the question had been raised last week, how important is it to actually focus on libraries? Because it sounds like you have heard some testimony about from academic institutions about lower usage of libraries.
It was the case that Cal State University, went through that whole scenario of essentially trying to defund it and community reacting to circumstances.
Yeah.
That brought that, elevated that issue.
Well, so I don't necessarily need to go through this in great depth with you, but I wanted to make you aware of it. The department has an annual survey called the Public Library Survey that we conduct. We unfortunately can't get every single one of the libraries to do anything we ask them to ever. So we encourage them gently to participate in the survey. Of the 186 libraries that we know of, public libraries that we know of in the state, 154 responded in 2024. We publish, and we've been recently publishing a report each year, but that report, which is on our website, doesn't show longitudinal usage, which I think is more to your point of question. So what we've done is just put together a quick PowerPoint that, and I want to give all credit to Josh Booz, who did this work in the department. He's our technology consultant and coordinates the survey, which means he's an expert cat herder. Do you ever have a bat lost in your house? Call Josh. So we just have some metrics about physical library visits, so people actually go inside the building, circulation of materials that are physical, circulation of electronic materials, a combined circulation, which looks a little bit more healthy, because when you combine those two resources together, you'll see that they're back to where they were pre-pandemic. And then interlibrary loan, which you just see on that slide 7, that continues to grow in our state. And then programs and program attendance are on one chart. So
Can I ask a question?
yeah,
When they all in-person visits, this is number of,
people, humans visiting the library.
it's only 8,625. That doesn't sound
This
right.
is the median.
okay, because I was like, I take my children like every day.
No,
So
you might
confused why it's 8,000 for the whole state.
So, let me just look at it. So we're looking at it's a longitudinal overview, and it's in-person visits.
Median,
And,
like a month?
this is annual. Let me look at the actual report.
There are more than 8,000 visits to South Burlington.
Yeah, I think
Like,
that's the median for life.
per library,
I
okay.
believe so, but I don't want to
Okay.
misinform you, so I'm just gonna.
And then you have the little tiny one.
Yeah, I mean, there's
Yeah.
no way it's gotta be the median for the
For
library.
the library,
Yes,
okay.
just numerically. Sorry, I don't appear to be just,
We like this data, right? Library people.
yeah, it would be good to clarify that on the slide though, for sure, because that could confuse people.
Yeah.
The one thing that's interesting as we're seeing more broadband in homes is that we are seeing fewer public computing sessions. And we talked about that a little bit in the department, and I think it's because more people are using their personal devices when they're coming into the library. And you can see that the usage of these Wi-Fi sessions has gotten higher over time. The Wi-Fi sessions are notoriously difficult to capture just because everybody's using a different Wi-Fi provider and routers. And so I do need to say that on slide 10, those numbers, we know they're a little bit fuzzy. But this gives you an idea of the usage of libraries in our state. And I think, to the earlier question about the inclusive and the exclusive, or the inclusive and the exclusive. And one thing I really encourage you to bear in mind is that there's not one material format that works for every Vermonter. I have visited a lot of libraries. I'm trying to get to all of your libraries. And I've been probably 110 or so at this point. And I have been seeing many instances where DVDs are on the shelf and people are using them. They're actively going in and out. CDs actively going in and out. Everyone doesn't have the same access to streaming. Everybody doesn't have the same access to the internet at home. A physical book is a much better way for a child to learn to read. So there can be a lot of reasons that libraries need to maintain physical books. When I heard the suggestion from Large Council about using either or combination, that's really what the department is going for, to have some materials. We don't necessarily need every material in both formats. We can't afford that. Vermonters can't afford that. What we don't want to see is that public libraries become completely digitized and there's no longer access to the print resources that people need for information and that they enjoy interacting with. So the thing to remember really though is that those words about print and electronic are specific to the state library. I don't want to be in a position as the state librarian where we are throwing out a copy of a historic Vermont book because somebody who doesn't understand libraries has made that decision for us. So we do want to be able to provide digital resources. We also want to be able to provide physical resources and have continued access to the collections of the state library for Vermonters, for historians, for people who are interested in using the primary text in its original form. So that's when you're looking at that part, it's not really about the whole library community. That's really specific to the state library collection and the Able Library collection. So just a thought on that. I also want to say something about book bindings, but please ask your.
I didn't quite understand your statement because I'm wondering if you're saying you don't want like an average Vermont citizen to throw out a rare book because they don't understand what they have. Like you want to make people more aware that the libraries want rare books, or you just don't want an untrained library employee to throw out a rare book?
Neither.
Okay.
Let me clarify. I'm saying in terms of the Department of Libraries collections, which is what that piece of statute and that the bill is relating to. I want the professionals in the Department of Libraries to continue to have the discretion to provide materials in either electronic format or physical form.
Oh, okay.
And not to have this be written in such a way that somebody might misinterpret it. And we have to have a legal battle to know if we can keep a physical historic book that we already own in the state library.
So ideally you want both.
Yeah, that's why I was saying,
So if you have a little language change you'd like for that, send it to us.
okay.
Very specific about.
I've included that in the testimony I shared previously, but I was also open to the either or. So I can just,
Again.
yeah.
Well,
Just because we've been seeing a lot of libraries that academic institutions primarily where the decisions may not be made by the library staff so much as by administrators who might have a slightly different perspective on the needs of the community they serve than the professional librarian who does that work. So I think as a librarian, I'm here to speak for the librarians, and I just would like for the state library to have the discretion to provide those materials and not be faced with saying we've completely moved online now. We might one day completely move online. We're not there yet. We don't have money to do
We're
it.
used to have copy a lot. That the benefit some history, some more history.
Right.
There's those values are worth a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we would need to have a lot of resources for digitization, and then you have to migrate the digitized items each time there's a upgrade to the format and platform. So it is the case that some of the material at the state library are, gosh, we've been around for 200 years now, so we've got some quite old books. Books from the state library were thrown out of the state house as it was burning. People saved the library. So we wouldn't want to be in a position where somebody says, you have to digitize that, and we sell it to the highest bidder. That's a resource for Vermonters that we want to visit. So that's just a quick walkthrough of the statistics. There was also a question about the capital needs, and this is related to the bonding portion of things. And I'm going to admit I'm not an expert in the bonding portion of things. I'm learning about it in order to understand the impacts on public libraries, what they need. My sense is that there is a lot of need in public libraries to adapt. So when you think about that little library that Tucker Anderson's grandfather supported as big as this room, well, if the community around it has grown, it's very hard to continue doing what you need to do in that old style library. A lot of the buildings are historic, a lot of additional costs come with preserving and maintaining the features of those buildings, and preserving that integrity of the feeling of that library. And then often adding on to that space to add a meeting room, to have a place that's big enough for people to have a yoga class at the library, or to have story time at the library, to welcome in families for playgroup. There are a lot of things that go on in libraries now that weren't happening 50 years ago. I thought it was, I unfortunately don't have a color printer, so I'm looking at a black and white version of the capital needs. Please disregard slide 2. I asked Daphne to post the different on slide 2, got carried over, but on slide 3, you should have a map of Vermont by county with breakdowns. And it's really interesting to look at that and to note that in Caledonia County, the median year that their libraries were built was 1890. Chittenden County, conversely, 1951. So there may be more need in certain counties of the state. And I think as you look at the map, you'll see that there's quite a lot of need in many of our rural communities with small populations in the towns and
So-
not necessarily lots of farms.
This is another like data challenge, I think, to look at it this way, because Chittenden County's probably just built a lot more libraries that are newer. Like it has old libraries like Fletcher Free that need a lot of care. But then it has a bunch of newer ones that bring up the average year something was built. So it's just not a great, like, it doesn't tell the story of the
It
data
doesn't tell the whole
particularly
story.
well. Yeah,
It tells a story, but not a
Right.
a complete story. There are certainly libraries in Chittenden County that are older. You know,
Right.
Westford,
yeah.
Fletcher Free, which was my home library,
Mhm.
and at the same time, the median age where they were developed, and we're going from the earliest part of construction of the building.
Sure.
There is still a data point here. I think you could provide more though, for sure.
You know, I mean, what it is saying the year a library was built versus the last time it was renovated is a really different picture.
Mhm.
And they both might be important, but I think it's hard to see that some of these counties just built libraries for something.
Some counties experience population expansion related to new public facilities directly relates to that. It's a good slide.
It might need us another slide to complement it for sure. though.
Right, like you can have a beautiful old library and you can have a new library has like asbestos in it, you know.
Yeah, and an example of that, for example, is Brattleboro. Yeah, so we have granted funds to Brattleboro. It's a newer library. It's built in the 60s, and they have to do asbestos mitigation at the library. So it is not the case that a brand new library doesn't need any work. South Burlington, which was, I grew up in you might say this, the north end of South Burlington or the south end of Burlington, but it's kind of a no man's land. But, you know, as a kid, I went to the library in high school, or I went to the Fletcher Free, which was a much bigger library and easier for me to get to. South Burlington built a new library, and then there was a storm and something happened to it. Suddenly the new library's roof had problems. So you can have a brand new library that suddenly needs some support. So I think there are two different things, and I wouldn't want to mix them, and we can try to see if we have more data to that point.
Senator Williams.
Question for you.
Yeah.
I'm looking at common thread of problems that the state libraries across the board have, and that's governance. We got multiple different systems. We got, like, my library has a board of trustees. I think they're a corporation. The municipality supports them financially. They get to make, so how do we fix that? So many legal issues that pertain to governance. Is there any way we can come up with a common thread that can make your job easier to fix
Well,
these problems?
I think you've heard me say before, Senator Williams, that sometimes I show up at a library and they ask, who's my boss? Is it the city clerk? Is it the town? Is it the mayor? Is it the board of trustees? There is something valuable about each of the structures. The incorporated public library has the autonomy to be a public library and have that as its primary function. The municipal public library has that structure of the municipality. I think it might be helpful. My understanding is that you'd like me to talk more with Ledge Council about that definitional piece. Even something like the language in the definition of public library that says that they should have some public funding. What does that mean?
Right.
Because they're all getting different amounts of public funding. When we were here a couple of years ago working on S-220, which became Act
Right.
150, we didn't kind of. I don't think that the committee had the appetite to dive in and say, what's a reasonable amount for the municipality to provide as far as support? But I think one of the issues is what is the amount of money that people are providing as support? Another issue is the independence of the library board. And it's something to remember as well is if a town charter calls out a different governing structure, well, that's the governing structure.
So we can fix policy here, we can set policy. We can't fix those, who's my boss?
Yeah.
Can I get a raise this year?
We're getting fewer of those questions now
Right.
because we made an incremental, you made an incremental.
I think you've made the difference
Well-
because you're going around talking to, identifying these issues.
Well, the working group, which was also a legislative imperative for the department, has really brought it. The department staff really appreciate that you all have listened to the input of the library community and are trying to work for this. I'm not sure, we want to be careful if we're making changes to something that's been in place for so long that we don't break it or we don't make things harder for people. But happy to look at that definitional piece. My real point in testimony about the definition of public library was that when you're making things available to public libraries, please tie back to whatever the definition of public library is in statute. Because I have been places where they say, we're a public library. They're not incorporated. They're taking donations. They're not municipal. They're taking donations. Not really clear who they are. And the department really is supporting the statutorily defined public libraries. So that was really my point in my testimony.
First question I had on the first day actually was, what constitutes something? Because I mean, some of them are 501c3s. They're not chartered, they're 501c3s, and I think that a lot of them did a really great job, but they should be considered public libraries for these purposes because they're public, kind of by definition, if they're a 501c3.
Yeah, and they're all different types of nonprofits as well. I was recently up in East Burke and I saw that there was an open flag at the Burke Mountain Club and Library. Has anybody seen this place? It's delightful. I peeled in. I was going to Canaan and I was like, I'm going here. There's a flag out there actually open. They've never been open when I've driven past. And one of their board members happened to be there. They don't have a library director, but they have an executive director of the club. They have formed 3 separate nonprofits where I think they just need a public library because it's a community center and it's a library. At first, they formed one library nonprofit and realized that wasn't the right kind. So then they formed another. So they have to solve the first. It is confusing for small communities to work on governance issues. So I think any support we can give them is beneficial.
Okay, so what do we want to do with this? You're going to talk to Tucker. And one of the issues is clarifying that just because you receive public funds doesn't mean you have to have public business on your board. Not intensive.
Oh, I didn't know if you were done.
No, just thinking out loud about what this meeting thing. We have to have a discussion as a committee
Okay,
about, and actually, since you're
yeah,
here, when we prioritize within that laundry list, libraries, I'm not convinced that they should be prioritized over the other eligible organizations. Maybe they should be, but I'm not convinced they should be.
I think if I could speak, if there's time for me to
Yeah.
speak to that a little bit on the topic.
So where we are, just to be clear here, is that section. We're looking at, 3, 2, 3. I mean, 2, 3. So I'm going to, it's not what we want.
I was looking at the page 3, line 11 with the and line 12 with the after school, universal after school. I can speak more. I need to look more into the bond.
Yes, this is the
Dynamic.
bottom of page 3.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if I can explain this a little bit. So right now, the state librarian, me or my designee, the assistant state librarian, Jeanette Schaefer, do attend the after school committee meetings. Because we were invited after they realized we weren't at the table and that we weren't actually called out in statute. we're totally open to that portion of it being added officially. What I think happened as that group, and this is conjecture, I think it's possible that as that group developed their programs, they had a real focus on the growth and the support of early childhood education programs and after school programs, which are extremely important and valuable to Vermonters. However, not every kid will use those programs, and the way that the grants are written, it would be very challenging for a public library to actually apply to get funding for their ongoing monthly Lego club, for example, to buy the Lego robotics kits and to have the laptops that support that great STEAM programming for everybody in the community. Similarly, we are truly strapped for cash sometimes for the summer reading program. We give very little support to public libraries for summer reading in the state. A grant of $350 doesn't get you much in terms of a summer reading program at your public library. So that is, I think, spoken to here to say the department could have some of this funding to have this statewide impact and statewide support so that more funds from the cannabis sales tax could be directed toward that. And I can build out a proposal for you. We have something in progress, and I wanted to talk to some of the folks in the committee that works on this to see what they might be open to so that we can kind of resolve that a bit on our.
So just to make sure we're clear what I'm saying, yes, I have no problem with adding including public libraries, for instance, on 120. And I don't necessarily have a problem with saying it has to get a reasonable portion, but I do want to know, because it is by definition competing with the other organizations delineated. And how do we know whether in fact, as much as we support libraries, we want to do everything great, that they actually should get a priority over others? That's what I want to have some sense of before we do it.
So we had the benefit, 2 days ago, meeting the after schools and summer programs director at the AOE. I think we should invite him in to have a chat about this particular section to see if there's a problem. If so, what's the problem? How do we rebalance with that? So anyway, there is a subject. So
You're waiting.
Just another point, going back to governance, it might be as simple as fixing, find out which towns actually have libraries that are, different legal aspects of corporation or whatever. Put an article on the ballot for town meeting day saying, whatever your definition of a public library is, would you consider allowing this to be adopted in your community? Because the taxpayers, the ones usually end up supporting the library with donations. If they don't, a lot of municipalities actually fund their libraries.
Yeah, and to be a public library, you need to have some public funding in the current statutory definition. So if no municipality supported a library, even if the shingle outside says public library, it's not quite meeting the public funding aspect because it needs to be ongoing. My understanding is it needs to be ongoing kind of annual regular support. I think that there is a challenge that I hear reported from colleagues who are library directors or trustees where sometimes they even have trouble getting their municipal public library funding on the ballot. And if you looked at town meeting day, you might not want to look too closely unless you've kind of fortified yourself, because how that plays out in every town could be very different as far as who brings it on the ballot. Is it included? Is it not included? Some will argue they want it as a separate measure. Some they don't want a line item. Some they want it included in the municipal. It's quite an interesting thing that there are so many different.
Theoretically, then, do libraries split in and out of being public depending on what happened last March?
I certainly hope not. I hope that every library is getting at least $1 of public support.
Okay.
But it might be, that's a line that we may want to look at and see, like, what does that really mean? Because there is, at this point in time, there is no discernible federal support direct to a public library that is ongoing and reliable. There might be a one-time grant for a capital project. There might be a one-time grant for a service or a program that they're running, but there is not a federal infusion that goes straight to each public library. So when you're looking at public funds, you're really looking at municipal funding.
You wanna go out for the waivers? Get it to me, I'll get a petition up when it comes to. I will, so it's that simple to get it put on the ballot.
Yeah.
You're gonna take a look at that and talk to her.
Okay.
Okay,
Thank you.
yeah,
While we have you, I don't know what the conversations in natural resources are gonna look like, but having been on economic development and GovOps, we're very reluctant to add more municipal bylaw requirements when 40% of our towns don't have municipal bylaws. So do you have strong feelings about that section? I'm otherwise inclined not to support that right now while we're trying to get more bylaw uptake.
Well, I think I would ask, I hear what you're saying, and I can see how if we're trying to get people to do something. And then we keep adding a hoop to jump through or another bar, that it can be really challenging. The thing I would question is how long has the public library been in their municipality? And what's their plan for it?
What if they don't have a public library?
There are fewer communities like that, that's a good question.
I mean, I would say the 40% of communities that don't have zoning and bylaws are the ones that probably don't have a municipality or don't have a lot of staff to keep this updated.
Right. I think one thing I would say is here in central Vermont, and right in this county, in Washington County, I have a friend who lives in Berlin, she has no public library, and their municipality doesn't contribute toward Kellogg Hubbard or Northfield or anywhere else. So the people of that town have to pay out of pocket for a public library. They don't necessarily, in a bylaw update, they wouldn't necessarily need to build a new building. They could just say what their intention is to make sure that their people have that service.
does this come into play only if you're doing a bylaw update, or does it force some other action?
Well, if you're doing bylaw modernization, you know, chances are if you're doing bylaws for the first time, you're going to be asked to do this too. So it's just a big barrier right now when 40% of our communities don't have bylaws. If anything, right now, we might look at taking some things away to get communities to do bylaws. So it may just not end up being this committee's discussion, but we are putting a lot of money right now into helping those 40% of communities even do any bylaws. And I don't know how much this costs. I don't know if it's really mission critical right now to getting them to have bylaws so they could plan where the library goes and where the housing is, something like that.
I think that's the right question. It's a mission critical right now.
Yeah.
I think that's the right question. And if you think it is, let us know.
Yeah, I mean, I always feel like when you're setting the stage and saying these are the core functions, as a state librarian, I'd like you to have libraries in that complement. So in that sense, yeah, if you're planning for the first time, considering that basic piece of the educational system in your town, how your citizens are going to access that in your town plan. What I would worry about is if you don't include it, when are they ever going to come back and update this bylaws again? It's gonna be 20 more years, maybe. So it's sort of, which is, but this recommendation, I want to be clear, didn't come from the department.
Maybe we could squeeze Kevin, Dimitri, or Charlie Baker in here for a few minutes, just to give us.
Right, and the majority of their communities have bylaws. It's
But they would.
the ones who don't have
Yeah.
bylaws are not even coming here to tell us. This would be another barrier.
Captain.
I think VLCT might be the best group. They know what every town has or doesn't have and why we're trying to get bylaws.
That would be fine too. So we'll, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. So, or, yes,
Before we go off, I have something I want to say.
Yeah.
To the committee. It's so important that I actually wrote it down. And, if it's okay.
yes, of course it is.
So, given the limited legislative time that we have left, I'm requesting process of target date for release of draft governor's map under Act 73. So the members of respond meaningfully to constituent concerns. And I want to know what the plan is. You know, everything that we do here is important. Every bill that comes through here is important, but I think the long pole in the tent, the one that keeps our tent up, is this Act 73.
It's the one I think about 24 hours a day.
Yep,
So,
I'm sure you do. So like to know what your plan is.
we'll talk about something.
Okay.
Do we readdress on Tuesday?
Yeah. Yep. All right, well, the plan. Yes,
Okay.
okay. Okay, we're